right, I think it's on. Yep. Okay. So we're gonna go over the project proposal. So I want to start off with this bottom section here. What I'm looking for in your proposal is a cohesive vision that you not only have a concept for your project, but you have a plan, that you've intentionally put together an approach to your project. Um, so after reading your proposal, I believe that your problem, premise, and research topics should all come together in a way that makes sense. So I should have that belief when reading it. Um, Students often overthink or overcomplicate things when a simplified approach would be better. So do your best not to overthink all of this. Um, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You'll have time to work through all of these ideas as the semester goes on, and things will change, and it should. I always tell my students that when they ask me if they want to change their topic, I say, great. Um, Obviously, if we're going from one topic to a radically different one, maybe less so, but the topic should evolve over time. And so that should take some of the pressure off. You don't have to get it perfect. And in fact, you shouldn't think in that way of getting things absolutely perfect right now. Um, so it's not set in stone. So you can change this. So I want you to just sort of be playing with these ideas. You know, um, this is just sort of your hypothesis of a project. This is the project as you see it going, and then once we actually get into it, it'll will adapt as the process unfolds. So, yeah, don't overthink it. I'm just looking for a plan, a cohesive vision, and I want to just see that you put some thought into it. And so hopefully um, this outline will help you do that. Sort of why I put these together this way is it's meant to kind of spur discussion, to spur things to write about. So you don't have to do all of these things. The only things that are required are these outermost bullet points. So these four things are the things that I need to see in some form. And then these smaller things are suggestions for how to do that. So let's dive into it. Um, so this is four now because I've tinkered with it a little bit. Um, I do recommend doing these in this order. And these should each be about a paragraph or so. These first two can maybe be done in one significant paragraph. It may take two paragraphs. And then these two should definitely be separate paragraphs. Your page count is about a page and a half to 3 pages. So this is quite short. And you can do it in this bullet pointed fashion. You can write this in an essay fashion, or you can kind of mirror this and write it in a bullet point, although I want to see like complete sentences here. But it doesn't have to be a formal essay. As long as you are gathering and organizing your ideas, I don't care what it looks like. I tend to outline this way. I tend to gather my thoughts in this kind of outline format while kind of doing concepts at the broader levels and then more significant writing underneath. You can do it however you like. So there's not one way that these proposals have to look. Whatever feels natural to you. Again, what I'm looking for is organization, thoughtfulness, a vision. So first thing you want to do is identify your chosen problem. So let me know kind of what are you responding to? What is the thing that you're looking out into the world and saying, I want to tackle this? And remember, these problems can be broad, heavy. Also, they can be quite niche. I don't really care what these problems are. They can be anything from global poverty to like silly things that are still, a problem, but not a problem in the sense that like poverty or global warming or war and famine or whatever. And again, do consider the emotional toll, the psychological, as well as the intellectual labor and toll that these projects have. And so there's nothing wrong with choosing a heavy topic, choosing a light topic. It's up to you. But I want you to identify your problem. And then I want a brief survey of the community that you are writing on behalf of. You ought to be looking at communities that you're a part of. You want to be able to bring that insider perspective to what you are discussing, um, to give some texture to that scholarly ethos that you're bringing. So you're going to be writing in a way that's objective, but speaking from, that first person. You want to be able to get your intuition and kind of your gut instincts involved in how you're researching, how you're reading sources and stuff like that. You need that kind of firsthand experience with this stuff. And so, yeah, grounded in a community. And this discussion could take a lot of different shapes. You can separate them and go problem, then community. You can start community and go into problem. You can blend them. There's a lot of different ways to do this. As long as you are identifying a problem and identifying a community that that problem is affecting. And so this is really important that if you are wanting to do something like poverty, um, ground that. You need to ground that in. Okay, let's look at how that's affecting Jonesboro, Arkansas, or if you're from elsewhere, that's an immediate way. And so you can do these big, broad topics, um, but you want to ground that and say, like, okay, I want to look at how that big, broad thing is affecting my specific people. Um, and then discuss the stakeholder. So, stakeholder is kind of the people affected. So your community is going to be made up of a lot of people, and not every single person in that community might be affected by that problem. So I really want you to hone in on, once you've discussed the community kind of at large, really we're looking at the stakeholders in that community, which are going to be the people who the problem is most directly affecting. And so if there's kind of a Venn diagram of, here's all the people affected by a problem, here's all of the people in a community, and those are our two circles, you're really focusing on that overlap of the people in the community affected by the problem. Those are stakeholders. Um, so those are the things that you must do. So here's some suggestions for how to do that. When I ask you to discuss a lot. So, and discussion just means writing. Discussion just means exploring in your own voice. So things you could discuss are a survey of how the problem is affecting the community. So you state what the problem is and who the community stakeholders are, but then spend a couple sentences describing the actual effect of what their everyday lives are like as a result of the problem. So give some of that color, give some of that texture, give some of that kind of highlight the reality of it, instead of just kind of talking at it from afar. Like really dig into what's going on. What is at stake as a result of the problem and who the stakeholders are. So I'd probably reverse that, like who are the stakeholders first, but then what are they losing? Are they losing their like financial well-being? Are they losing their dignity as free beings? Are they losing their dignity? Are they what is being lost? Or what stands to be gained that is not being gained, where it's like we have all this potential to do this thing. These people, it would be so easy to help these people, or it'd be so easy to solve this problem, or it'd be so easy to do whatever, but we're not doing it. And so it doesn't have to be here's what they're losing, but here's what they could gain, but they are being kept from gaining that. So it's saying, they could be live more dignified lives, but because of this, that they're not able to achieve that, or they could be more financially stable, but because of whatever, we're not able to do that. Um, and then ultimately why the problem matters. And most importantly, I really, of all these, recommend you do this one, is why it should be addressed now. Often in the real world, if you have to write a proposal, you're having to convince someone usually to give you money. If you're doing a proposal, you're saying you should okay my project. And that can be in the form of like pitching something to a boss where they're saying, "Hey, we're going to pay you to do this. This we give you a salary. We're deciding what you do with your time. You can pitch this project and say like, okay, that's a great project. We're happy to pay you to do that." Or if you're like in the sciences or something, you're proposing for grants and you're saying, "Hey, we're wanting to do this work. We need grant money to make it happen. Here's our proposal." Proposals are inherently competitive. You're competing with other people proposing things. So your boss may already have an idea of what they think you should do with your time, but they're going to hear you out to see if your idea is better than theirs. Obviously, with grants, highly competitive. You're competing with other people with their own projects. Um, it may not and likely isn't a question of whether the problem you've identified is a problem. The question is it more of a problem than something else? Let's say that you're looking at a problem and it's not as pressing where you say like this dam is going to break, but it's not going to break for 200 years. It's like, all right, well then that's probably not something we need to spend our time on right now. This person says that this dam over here is going to break in 1 year. We're going to focus on fixing that before we fix the dam that's going to break in 200 years. So your job isn't just to convince your audience that this is a problem in general, in the abstract, but this is a problem right now that needs to be fixed right now. Um, this appeal is kairos. Kairos is Greek for timeliness. And so you want that kairotic element of not only is this a problem affecting people, but it is a problem that needs to be dealt with now or explored now. Um, and so I want to see that urgency in your writing. Now, don't overdo this, right? A lot of students hear this and they're like, "I got you," and then they make it sound like the world is at peril, or that ultimately they overdo this, and that's very off-putting. When you present something in far too strong a light, it becomes garish. It becomes too much. It becomes kind of blinding. So you have to make an appropriate choice here. Now, some of you may be dealing with very serious topics in which that more, gravity may be appropriate, but you have to walk a fine line of how do I, it's not about persuading someone that it's the most important thing. It's about helping them see it, if that distinction makes any sense. You're not artificially inflating the significance of the problem, but rather you're revealing the urgency already there that your reader just isn't attuned to yet. So, yeah, don't overdo it. It's not to make it seem like it's a really big deal, but rather reflecting yourself on what makes this a big deal to me. Why do I think this is worth my time versus something else? Why is this significant now? And then revealing that, getting your reader to tune into what you're tuned into. So yeah, don't overdo it, but definitely don't underdo it, because if you underdo it, it has no impact, right? And so this is our challenge as writers, is to walk these very fine lines. Right. So that's the kind of first two elements, which is really kind of two sides of one element. Identify a problem, identify a community, and then discuss how it's affecting the community, why it's an important problem to be addressed. Right. Then we need a clearly defined research question, which is your topic. So your research question is essentially the question you're asking about your topic. Your topic choice is kind of baked into the question that you're asking. So what is that question? Simply ask it. Say, this is the question we're wanting to ask. Um, One thing that's really important, we'll talk a little bit about this in a moment, but it can be overstated that remember the purpose of what we're doing as researchers is not to answer problems, right? Think about how the world works. Very few people are facing real world problems and then going to a professor and asking what to do. Instead, whose job is it to fix problems? Well, hopefully, things like elected officials, right? Our mayor and the mayor's office is hopefully solving problems in our communities. Same with, state representatives. Hopefully they are looking at the problems of their constituents and making strides to solve those problems in ways that benefit the constituents. Now, how do they do that? They go to the literature. They ask academics, what have we learned about this? What technologies are available to us? And so academics are the beginning of the solution, but are not themselves the solution. Our job is to find not answers, but understanding, to be able to say, here's all the data, here's the best data. We've combed through all of the data, and here's the best data points that we found that is actionable. That if you understand this data, you are taking a significant stride toward formulating a solution. And so this is your job, is to comb through this ocean of information and find the most important bits, and then to present those bits to your audience, which may be politicians. It may be people in the private sector looking to start businesses. Because what the economy is really meant to do is create products that help our lives and improve our lives. And so it's why we always think it's silly when we watch like an infomercial and we see a product that like invents a problem, so that it can then solve it with the product. Where you're like, that's not a problem. It's only a problem if you buy the product and then use the product to solve the problem the product has fabricated as existing. So this is when the economy runs wild and is doing a bunch of pointless stuff. It's inventing problems just so it can solve them. Um, we want to find real problems that are actually organically emerging in the world. Um, and then say like, hey, if someone started a business to create or created a product, um, to solve this, they stand to benefit financially, but the world stands to benefit from that product. Think about diseases and medication. Diseases arise organically from the way that human, or biological systems work. Companies recognize that. They create medication, they create treatments to solve that and improve the welfare of the people suffering with those problems. And so that's your job. Say like, hey, this is a problem. Hey, politicians. Hey, economic entities, um, do something about this. And here's what I've learned to give you a leg up to kind of jumpstart that process for you to solve it. So it's very important to understand this. Your job is not to solve problems. Your job is to enable the problem solvers of the world to um, solve that problem efficiently. Um, So, what's the question you ultimately hope to answer? So, by answer, I don't necessarily mean an answer to in the sense of a solution to the problem, but that an answer in the sense of understanding. What's the question that if you are able to answer that question, you will have arrived at a deep, meaningful understanding of the problem. What is it? Where does it come from? What would solutions look like? And stuff like that. Um, a discussion of how answering your question will be a meaningful step toward dealing with the problem. And so this is really where I'm asking you to dig in and ask, why is that question worth answering? Why is this a meaningful step? So if we say, um, one interesting thing that was the what was it called? Universal basic income or basic universal income as a solution to stagnating wages, right? Wages have stayed the same. People aren't getting paid any more than they were decades ago, due to inflation and a bunch of and rising costs and stuff like that. And yet all this other stuff's going up. Houses cost more, education costs more, goods cost more, right? So how do we deal with that? One solution was the universal basic income. If we give everyone a stipend, that makes up for stagnating wages. Um, and let's say you want to research that, then your discussion here would be, recently the universal basic income was launched in experiments across the country. Um, this is the first meaningful attempt at solving the increasing wage gap. Um, it would be a meaningful step toward dealing with the problem because it's the first real attempt to deal with the problem, and we need to figure out how effective it was, right? And so that's how that discussion might go, of kind of just justifying why is this the question to ask? Why is this the thing to look at rather than the dozens and dozens and dozens of other possible questions you could have asked. Um, so here you're just kind of defending your question and explaining why it rather than another variation of it. A discussion of what exactly, notice the exactly is emphasized, you're trying to illuminate or understand about the problem topic. So this is just sort of another, I wouldn't probably do both of these. I would pick one. But what are you going for? What exactly is it you're trying to understand and be specific? And this one's very important because it's going to kind of engage with this last one. But yeah, just what's your plan? What specifically is it that you're trying to understand? If it's universal basic income thing. Maybe it's saying I want to see how much did it actually help and how much of a burden was it on the government that cut those stipends, right? Did the government see that local economy get stimulated? Were people happier? Did more people, um, you know, end up getting jobs because now they have enough money to um, afford the things that make them happy, and being happy made them more likely to want to get out in the world and do stuff. Or was it like government were cutting these checks, they just kept the money, they didn't spend it, the economy wasn't stimulated, and the government was just poor, and now they're in a worse situation. Um, right. So trying to dig into what is interesting about this. What exactly are you trying to understand? Um, and then again, a reminder, your goal is to seek understanding, not provide outright answers. And hopefully there are answers along the way. Hopefully at the end of this project, there's an answer kind of looking back at you. If your reader takes all your work seriously, the answer's kind of jumping out at them. But the ultimate goal of the project isn't to produce that answer, but to produce understanding. And the idea is they kind of go hand in hand. You can provide an answer but not provide understanding, right? If you can just be your opinion, you just throw out, here's what I think the answer is, and then your reader can just agree or disagree, and that's all that your paper has to offer, which is not much. Versus understanding, you can't have understanding without having something at least close to an answer, right? So even if an answer doesn't come of it, you still have understanding. Your paper has still done something, even if it doesn't give answers. Even if it ultimately says, there's no way of answering this right now. We need new technologies. There's something we need that we don't have that makes answering this impossible. That's a massive step forward. We go from this ambiguity, not really knowing what to do, to, hey, we have a clear path forward. Even though we don't have answers, we've taken this big step. And so answers without understanding, pretty not worth much, not worth doing. Understanding in and of itself extremely valuable. So yeah, your drive is to understand the problem, understand what's going on, understand how it's impacting various things like stakeholders in communities, and hopefully, if you're lucky, uh, there's sort of answers that kind of reveal themselves in the process. But even if they don't, again, you're still taking strides toward, in this process of revealing a solution. Um, a particular emphasis on why that way of approaching the topic is the best way in your view. So again, kind of just defending why this, just explaining your choices, uh, and why this is a good direction to go in. Why does this particular understanding you are trying to find, why the particular understanding you're trying to find is likely to facilitate the best possible future, which is another way of saying kind of the same thing. As academics and really as human beings doing work in the world, our striving is toward the best possible world, right? We're trying to bring about what we view as the best possible world, which hopefully means alleviating the suffering of people whose suffering is pointless, improving the quality of life of everyone, increasing the freedoms and liberties available to people, which means giving them more choices. The more money we have, the more economic choices we can make. There's a relationship between how much capital we have and how much freedom we have in a capitalistic society, right? And so doing things like finding ways of making everyone financially able is worthwhile. Figuring out ways of making everyone healthy, bodily, is that a word? How to make people like able-bodied, extremely worthwhile endeavor. And so what is your contribution to the best possible future as you see it? How does this project connect to that best possible future? Um, right. So this is the meat and potatoes. This is really the core. This should be two, three paragraphs, right? So if this is one or two paragraphs, this is two or three paragraphs. And so by this point, we should have, over a page of writing. And then finally, an overview of what kind of sources or information you'll be engaging. This one, I'm not going to go as finely over. Some of you may have an immediate idea of what kind of sources, what kind of things you're going to look at. Some of you, if you're researching topics that you don't know a lot about, you don't know kind of the the kind of overall shape what all is going on with the topic. You might not know where to start, which is fine. Hopefully, when you did your preliminary research, like I taught everybody, that solved that problem. But if that's still something you're running into, this might be a little bit thinner. That's okay. But discuss what kind of things you want to explore and why that particular form of exploration will likely yield meaningful results. So if you're looking at universal basic income, you may say, I'm going to look at, if you know of, like in Ohio, they launched this in 17 counties. I'm going to look at the data from those 17 counties. I'm also going to look at some theory. I'm going to look at a couple theorists and who came up with this idea and see how they view this and what they would say comes next. So I want to look at some practical data. I want to look at some theory, and that's primarily the sources I'm going to be looking at. Um, and so anywhere from I'm going to look at this like abstract theoretical stuff to I'm going to look at this specific kind of data, down to I'm going to look at these exact studies. That's a whole spectrum. I just kind of want to know what kind of things you want to look at. Um, and more generally, just what's your overall plan? What are you going to look at? How are you going to put different things into conversation with each other? What are you going for? So again, 375 to 750 words. That's fluid, right? So if you're doing more outlining like this, it might be less than that, right? Ultimately, my what I'm looking for is a cohesive vision. If it is short and does not have a cohesive vision, we've got a problem. If it's short, but there is a clear cohesive vision and you are just knocking all these out of the park in a very efficient way and you don't need that many words, great, I'm happy. So ultimately, the word count is arbitrary. It's just if you are writing it in a, paragraph form, it should take roundabout anywhere from a page and a half to 3 pages to do this. Some will need more, some will need less. That doesn't mean if you write an 800 word proposal and it goes nowhere in particular and is just all over the place, we've got a problem with that too. So, what I'm looking for is cohesive vision that you've clearly thought about all of these things, that you've not just chosen a topic, a week and a half ago and haven't thought any more about it, right? That you've sat down and you've really thought through all of these elements. And so this should guide you through doing that. If you haven't put a ton of thought into it, just don't start writing immediately, but sit and take some notes, write for yourself what the problem is, what the community is, explore these things kind of maybe in an outline, and then write the actual proposal. So we're going to say this will be due. Let's see. Let's shoot for next Wednesday, the 17th. We'll shoot generally for there and we'll see how it's going. If everyone is doing great and Monday comes around and everyone's done, wonderful. We'll cut it there and then I'll start reviewing them because I want to talk one on one with each of you, bring your proposal up, we'll look at it together, and I'll kind of give you the stamp of approval or say like before we get started, let's work on this. Let's kind of get a tighter idea here. I've never rejected a proposal, but I have certainly told students kind of go back to the drawing board on particular elements. I may say, you need, a stronger research question, or you need to have a better grasp of what is it you're trying to understand, or you don't really have a problem, or you don't really have a community, right? So, um, definitely there may be tinkering that needs to be done, but generally students all come up with really great um, projects. So the sooner you can get done with that, and in fact, probably come Monday, I'll go ahead and open that up and we'll start taking a look at those. So I'll say informally, it'll be due come uh, class time next Monday. But I'll expect it done by end of class Wednesday. I expect to have spoken with everybody about their proposals to be totally done with proposals by next Friday, right? And so, um, yeah, but shoot for next Wednesday, September 17th. Um, right. I think that's about it. If you have any questions, email me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what everyone comes up with. Let's see. Stop and end.